The Republican Party rolled out the legislation that would repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, known widely as Obamacare, this past Thursday, and there was some interesting parts to the legislation that did not seem to have anything to do with repealing or replacing Obamacare. I am, of course, talking about the provision that will freeze the federal funding to Planned Parenthood. The funds will be frozen because there have been many accusations thrown the way of Planned Parenthood over the years, which have convinced some people that the funding of Planned Parenthood should at the very least be frozen, if not cut altogether. What I want to do is look at some of the more popular reasons as to why Planned Parenthood should have its funding cut and see if there's any merit to those arguments and therefore any merit to the provision in this new piece of legislation to freeze the funding. Let's mine for truth. The bill specifically states that there will be no federal funding for Planned Parenthood for an entire year. The first thing that should be looked at is if this bill will even pass to begin with. Because if there's no chance for this bill to pass, then this whole drama, this whole kerfuffle would be the very definition of much to do about nothing. I believe the chances of this bill passing and then the funding frozen are very high. I mean, let's just look at the makeup of Congress. The United States has a Republican president and a Republican majority in both houses of Congress. I would be very surprised if this bill ends up not being passed. It may eventually have the Planned Parenthood provision of the bill ruled unconstitutional, but as of right now, the bill will pass and Planned Parenthood will have its funding frozen for 1 year. Now, the obvious question is, should Planned Parenthood have its funding frozen for a year? Simply put, fuck no. Of course, the funding for Planned Parenthood shouldn't be frozen, cut, or reduced. I understand that some people do not want Planned Parenthood to be funded due to it providing abortion services, but abortion, I'm sorry to tell you, is in fact constitutional. Roe v. Wade was ruled in 1973. Not only did the anti-abortion people lose, but you lost a very, very long time ago. You need to move on and try to put your time and effort into something else that is actually politically feasible instead of the pipe dream of the quote-unquote good old days when women had to terminate their fetuses via coat hanger and forced miscarriages. But hey, maybe that's just my own liberal bias seeping in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Planned Parenthood is in fact some sort of demonic cesspool that is powered solely by the fetuses of aborted children. So, let's look at the arguments for why Planned Parenthood should be defunded. One that I've come across many times is that Planned Parenthoods are somehow unsafe environments, and because of this they shouldn't get funding because the people that go there are somehow in danger. This right here is the definition of fear-mongering. This would be the intro class to fear-mongering, because whenever I see the claim that the practices of Planned Parenthood are unsafe, there conveniently is never actually a case of harm, death, or abuse that comes with the claim of a lack of safety. All of the videos that anybody has ever seen about Planned Parenthood and any dangers going on there are either 100% legitimately fake or exaggerated. What I have seen is that Planned Parenthood has fought against restrictions that are worded in a way so that their institutions would be shut down in the guise of safety. The most recent attempt was in Texas, where the state legislature passed a law that would make all Planned Parenthood facilities be considered surgical centers on account of the abortions, even though some of those centers don't perform abortions to begin with. Under this law, all but one of the Planned Parenthoods in Texas would have been forced to close because only one of those Planned Parenthood centers had admitting privileges. Please tell me the reason why places that do not perform any surgeries would need to be classified as surgical centers and therefore need admitting privileges. The only reason why this would need to be a thing is if the state legislature of Texas wanted to find a loophole to shut down as many Planned Parenthoods in the state as they could. So there's no validity to that claim. Planned Parenthoods are perfectly safe, or as safe as they can be in comparison to other places such as hospitals. Of course there's going to be accidents, but to say that if you're walking into a Planned Parenthood, you're statistically more likely to die is just wrong and based off of bullshit. The next reason for people that people have argued for shutting down Planned Parenthood is that Planned Parenthood is somehow or another independently wealthy, which is another farce. If you look at the numbers that are provided from AUL.org, which is an organization that tries to convince people that Planned Parenthood should be defunded, they make the argument that Planned Parenthood makes too much money and can survive with no federal funding. But look at the numbers that AUL themselves provide. In 2007, for example, the total revenue was a little more than $1 billion. The government grant was $336 million, and they had excess revenue over expenses, which, by the way, is not profit, so it's okay for Planned Parenthood to have this number of $114 million of excess revenue. This pattern continues for every year they highlight. If the government funding was not given to Planned Parenthood, they would be in a deep, deep deficit, which is a bad thing. That means their argument doesn't hold, does not stand. It means that they're not financially wealthy or independently wealthy. Also, the majority of their services are aimed at the young and poor. If Planned Parenthood cannot provide the proper education and care for the poor and young, then the poor and young will have more children, which is only a bad thing. There's not a single country on the planet Earth that has a high rate of uneducated and young people having children. That's totally fine. From countries like Somalia and Afghanistan to states like Mississippi, if the young and uneducated have a higher rate of pregnancy, the worse the place is. It is not the opposite. It is not a good thing for a 15-year-old that barely knows how to read to have a family. If President Donald Trump, his cabinet, and the Republican Party at large really want to make America great again, then he would not bring the reproductive health standards back to the 1950s when coat hangers were in vogue. They would want to give Planned Parenthood a larger reach due to the type of people they serve. America would not become great via high school dropouts having children. Can you imagine the absolute clusterfuck this country would become if 16 and pregnant was not just an abomination of a reality TV show, but instead the norm? We would not move forward. We would decline. We would regress. We would retard. The smart thing to do in this situation is to leave Planned Parenthood the fuck alone.